us out with this one, and then we won't need another one. I think I'm gonna try to work with him to come up with some type of list, because some of the people, at least two of the people on the list, they didn't want to be on there, so I don't know how they got on. None whatsoever. None whatsoever. And I didn't know that. Councilman Divatario told me, because I know him. He's not interested. I reached out to the lady. She was lady. She's already on there, but she want to be off. Her term is up. Oh, she did? Until you replace. That's what I thought. Well, that's what I was told too, so I thought she was doing, I think she got frustrated with the license is taking so long. I guess that's fair. We sit there for 6 extra months because we need to get it right. It said 6 o'clock when I came in here the first time.
Yeah, at least 4. Five. Wow. Hammond City Council public hearing agenda, November 15th, 2022, 5:30 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilman Andrews,
Present.
Councilman Divatario,
Present.
Councilwoman Gonzalez,
Present.
Councilman Leon,
Present.
Councilman Wells.
Public hearing, item number 1.
An ordinance to approve a rezoning request by RE3 Properties LLC owner to rezone lots 60, 61, and 62 of Block 3 of Vaccaro Park subdivision located at 1409 West Church Street from RM-2 to MX-C Z-2022-09-00112. Recommended approval by the Zoning Commission. Lacey Landrum.
This was heard by the Zoning Commission on October 20th. There was a unanimous approval of recommendation from all 5 members of the commission. This is really just bringing this property in alignment with the other properties that are on the same block. This is in District 4 along West Church Street. And as you can see from kind of the map that's towards the middle, this property is actually in the middle of this map, and all of these properties around it are all labeled MXC. So this property is kind of the outlier and would be coming into alignment with the rest of them along that West Church corridor, which is one of our major collector streets in the city. This does also align with our future land use map in that same direction.
Anyone from the public on this matter? You come up to the microphone, please give us your name and address.
Sally Trapani, I own 1500 West Church Street. It's being rezoned, but what exactly would it be used for? It's an empty lot right now, correct?
No, it has a
It has a house. Has a house on it right now, single family.
So they would knock the house down and then build something else?
Not necessarily. The other houses on that same street, they're zoned, what they're moving this one to, MXC, and they have houses on there. They'll just be able to use it for that MXC zoning like the ones next door to it.
Okay, which means that they can build apartments or anything like that type of thing on it?
Where's? Yeah.
No, so MXC is not it does not allow for apartments. MXC is kind of a mix between, and that's where it comes from, mixed use. commercial, which means that it can be like an office building. Across the street from this property directly is the old school building that used to
Yeah, that's me.
handle, right, so it used to handle the school uniforms. So it could be something along those same lines. It's not going to be large-scale apartment complex or things along those lines. It can't be heavy industrial or light industrial. Can't be like a bottle manufacturing plant. But most of the time, they're retail, office, those kinds of uses could come in there.
Do we have the list up here somewhere right now of the MXC4?
We've got this set up for the
You own the property next door to it? Yeah,
I'm assuming it's across the street.
across the street?
Yeah, the
Okay.
big red building.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Well, it's kind of just a private facility now. We were trying to sell it and we couldn't sell it, so we kind of put a batting cage in there for our son. He was going to St. Thomas, and now we just let people use it, friends.
So most of the uses are seen there, all medical could go there, all office, B&B, personal services like hair salon, barber, beauty shops, florists, real estate office, banks, dry cleaner could go there, animal care, like a grooming store, probably a vet, but it depends on the licensure. Restaurants, retail sales, convenience store without gas or with gas. This is a very, it's a very small lot. You couldn't probably make all that fit, but, light industrial could go there, but again, it's a very small lot that has certain setbacks to it, so I don't think any of the rest of those items would even fit on the lot.
Okay.
So that's the kind of landlocked in addition. It's not just, it doesn't just open the door automatically. The vehicle services, a reception or a banquet hall, again, that would require a certain amount of parking, but probably would not be suitable to this lot size. So they're kind of limited by the fact of the size of the lot itself and its location. Now, if someone in the future, let's say, bought up the block and then combined everything together, then it would have a different use.
There would be another meeting, another
Yeah,
hearing.
That would be a combination of multiple lots, so that would be a different kind of development.
Okay.
This is just to rezone that one single lot where the single family home is right now.
Okay.
And they did not indicate to us that they were trying to change anything. I think they just wanted to come into conformity with the block. Now, that could change. We don't know. We're not mind readers, but that's what it's looking at, is all these uses would be allowed in the future.
Lacey, can you show on the screen the mixed use, like the actual, what it is now, and how it's the only one?
Yes, so that's.
Yeah, I think your building's zoned MXC2, the one, the red building across the street is the same zoning.
All the lots that have the MXC that are the slightly darker green, I know this map is hard to see with the lighting and everything, but the slightly darker green are already zoned MXC.
Okay.
The one that is hatched in red is the lot that they're speaking about,
Okay.
changing the zoning of. And then, so all the lots you can see to the east side of it are that MXC already. The two lots, including yours across the street, are MXC. The ones to the left and to the right across the street are MXN, which is similar. There's only 3 uses that drop off between MXN, mixed neighborhood, and mixed commercial. And then the lots to the west side are MXC. So there's only a few of these holdovers that are actually RM2. And that's why this whole corridor in our future land use map actually shows West Church all being a mixed commercial use, which is kind of a transition between our heavier commercial versus our neighborhood.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else from the public? Hammond City Council regular session agenda, November the 15th, 5:38 p.m. Roll call, please.
Councilman Andrews,
Present.
Councilman Divatario,
Present.
Councilwoman Gonzalez,
Present.
Councilman Leon.
Present.
Our prayer. Most gracious, love, eternal Father, we thank you on this evening, Father. We give you the glory and honor that is due your name. We thank you for your darling Son who died upon the cross that we too would have access to the tree of life. Father God, I ask you continue to bless our city, state, and our country. Continue to bless and protect our men and women that protect us and keep us safe from harm and danger, our police and our fire department. I ask that you continue to bless this council and their families. Continue to give the council the wisdom and knowledge on high to continue to move forward. I ask that you continue to bless our city administration. Give them the knowledge and the tools that they need to be able to equip us to move our city forward in the days to come. We thank you that this evening that everything will be decent, order, pleasing, and in your sight. Therefore, you will get all glory, you will get all honor and all praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right, our pledge of allegiance, I ask that all veterans and active military please render the proper salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Next on the agenda, can I get a motion to approve our minutes of October the 25th, 2022, please?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Aye.
Councilman Divatario.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Aye.
And at this time, we'll have a presentation given to us from the home study update.
Good evening, council,
Good evening.
administration. I'm Joe Meir. I'm the chairman of the Housing Committee, and here to give a report on the update on what's going on with the Housing Committee. We've been meeting by way of Zoom and getting updates from civics monthly. I think we had skipped 1 month because it just wasn't enough to talk about, so we just pushed it one meeting forward. Tonight, we're going to get an update from Lois Colston and Michelle with civics by way of Zoom. And also, this is on element 2. I think we've got a couple of our board members, of our committee members here. I see Karen. Okay. So, Lois, can you hear us?
Those speakers don't look like they're on. He said she's not connected.
Maybe she's running late.
You got a cell phone number for her?
I'm gonna give
There she comes. Good evening, Lois.
Good evening. Can you all hear me?
We can. Can you guys hear her? Okay. We've already did the introduction, Lois, so if you, and if Michelle's with you, if she wants to log on also, or if it's just you, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is just me this evening, and I heard the beginning of your introduction and then realized I wasn't being let in, so I had to re-log in. So I'm glad I'm here now, and appreciate y'all putting me on the agenda tonight to talk about this. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Lois Colson. I'm the project manager for the Hammond Housing Growth Study. Been meeting with your esteemed colleagues on the Housing Advisory Committee every other week roughly. As Joe mentioned, we did skip one meeting recently, and we didn't have much to discuss, but we had a lot to do, so it was much needed extra time on our end to prepare for this presentation, so I appreciate that. And with that, I'm gonna be quiet for a second, not multitask, so I do this correctly. Share my screen. Just a moment. Now, I won't be able to see you in a moment, but you should still be seeing me and the presentation maybe, or maybe you'll just see the presentation. Let me know when you see.
Okay, we can see it.
Okay. Now I've got to see my part. Oh, yes, I'm sorry, just a moment. It went away, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it did.
Okay, 1 second, it's coming back up here. That's user error on my part. Okay, am I back? All right, let's get started. I know you have probably a packed agenda. I expect this to take no more than 10, 15 minutes. I will try to be slow enough so you capture what I'm talking about. And I just want to say one more time, I appreciate this opportunity to meet with all of you on the council and anyone that's taken time out of their evening to come join us tonight to hear about the housing growth study. So as mentioned, I'm Lois Colson. I work for Civics. We started work on the study in April. And we did meet with the council, I believe it was the end of June or early July, a few months ago, to discuss the first phase of this study. And we had a great question from the audience. Is everybody hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay, all right. Great question about the purpose. What are we doing here? So I've added this slide, and hopefully this will explain a little better about why we're here tonight and why I'm talking to you all. So the city in late 2020 put out a call for consultants to help develop a data-driven report to assess current conditions in strategic areas of Hammond about the vacant and blighted residential properties specifically. And at the end of the study, Civics will bring back some recommendations about how to address the impacts of high vacancy and blighted property, and that'll be in the next phase. So we're not going to be talking about the recommendations this time. Just generally, the study is broken down into 3 different phases you see there on the right side of the screen. The first phase is what we talked to you about earlier this summer. The second phase, element 2, is what I'm here to talk to all of you about tonight. And as mentioned, the third phase will be best practices in other jurisdictions and recommendations. And pretty much just covered this. This is just a visual of the timeline. Project kickoff was in April, and we'll hopefully finish up the report and a final presentation at the end of this year. So I'll probably be back in maybe just another month, or if we need to push it out maybe to January, we may do that, but it'll be very soon, either way. And to recap, in element 1, also the first phase of the study, the request was for Civics to identify strategic areas, or also known as enhancement areas, in Hammond. These were supposed to be areas, and they are areas that pose challenges, but also opportunities for improvement, given the right interventions that will hopefully be revealed and discussed in more detail in the next phase. So the 7 enhancement areas that we identified were based on vacancy. We collected data in the area, and we identified these areas based on vacancy, redevelopment potential, a market demand, and then single family and multifamily housing demand. And what we came up with are the 7 bold bounded boundaries that you see on the map on the screen. Hopefully everybody can see them fairly well. We've got the large enhancement area labeled as 1041 over in the northeast portion, 4 of the enhancement areas over in the northwest side of the city, and then 2 towards the below downtown with 3004 and 5032. Now, like I said, these were chosen because they pose some challenges, but we also look at that as opportunities for some investment and improvements. So we're in element 2, as mentioned. That was a recap of what we did in the first phase. So in element 2, we were asked to do a property inventory of those 7 enhancement areas, and then eventually assess the properties that we inventoried. And specifically, the property inventory is based on vacant lots and dilapidated and blighted residential structures. So it wasn't a inventory of every property in these enhancement areas. We were specifically pulling out the ones that are vacant, dilapidated, and blighted. And I'm going to talk those bolded terms. We're going to talk a little bit more in detail about what exactly those mean for purposes of the study. The second piece of element 2 is a property assessment, and I'll show that to you a little bit later in the presentation. We came up with a rubric to visualize different pathways and assess the properties and their most feasible outcomes in the future. And then we did a smaller piece of element 2, but just as important is a review.
Lois,
Yes.
you locked up just a second. You said the second element, and then it locked up. Go ahead. We can hear you now.
Did you get this? Did you hear me talk about this slide?
Yes.
Okay. So let me know if I missed something here, but the property inventory, the way that we collected the data for the different properties in the enhancement areas was through a survey. So in September and October of this year, we had a surveyor go out and collect data. I would be surprised if anyone saw him, but he was out there driving around collecting data on the vacant lots, dilapidated and blighted property, which you'll see moving forward as D/B for shortening. And over 400 properties were surveyed in 5 of the 7 enhancement areas. The blue shaded areas actually were surveyed by our surveyor. The 2 that were not directly surveyed are the very top northwestern portion, the 0041 and the 5032. To be honest, we just flat ran out of time. There's a lot of properties in all of these 7 enhancement areas. And we felt like we had really strong data about the 5, and we made some rough estimates about these other 2. And we don't feel like it's impacted the overall assessment and eventual recommendations. So I think it's still good data that we collected and can still be used. As I promised, I want to talk about those terms that have been bolded in the last couple of slides, because they can be misconstrued pretty often and easy to get confused with different types of properties. So the types of properties that we were looking at were vacant lots, not to be confused with a property that has a vacant structure. So I think everybody's familiar. You have pockets of vacant lots all around every city. Hammond's no different. Blighted property, this is where I want to make sure I'm clear. There's blighted and dilapidated properties. I'm using both of those terms because blighted are the properties that actually have a code enforcement lien from the city of Hammond for a demolition or repair case. I believe the city has The Code Enforcement Office has 7 different blighted terms, cases that they can file. We only looked at the demolition repair cases. Then dilapidated, that is a property that is considered blighted, but in a very specific way, and it does not have a blight lien. So you may have a blighted property that is dilapidated. In fact, I would most likely anything that is blighted is also dilapidated. But anything that is dilapidated is not necessarily have a blight lien. Hopefully, it's a very slight difference, except for it makes a difference when you're looking at the properties and categorizing them into different property types. And then finally, neighborhood scale infrastructure, another important term. For purposes of this study, we only looked at infrastructure that impacts the quality of the neighborhood and can be seen from the user's perspective. So we're talking about sidewalks, streetlights, connectivity between community assets, bike lanes, bus stops, also referred to as surface infrastructure. Now, our inventory after the survey, we put all the property types into a table, and this is what the results were. That property that was up in the northeast corner that we did a survey in, it's the second largest of all of the enhancement areas, but it had 148 vacant lots, more than any of the other, quite a bit more than any of the other enhancement areas. This same enhancement area also had the most dilapidated or blighted structures that were unoccupied, as far as we could tell, unoccupied, and then dilapidated and blighted structures that were occupied. It also had the most, even though it was still a pretty small number. And then here's those 2 enhancement areas that were not surveyed, but we were able to estimate roughly the number of vacant properties. We also took a look and collected data on these properties about their landscape conditions. Just a reminder, these are landscape conditions of those property types. It's not every property in the enhancement areas, it's just the vacant lots, dilapidated, and the blighted structures. And as you can see, we have 183 that come out as being noted as being overgrown, and then 24 with significant trash and debris. Abandoned vehicles, not as many as I thought we would have come up with, but we have noted here 11. And here's just some examples of the type of properties that were collected, that data was collected on. This top left one is considered a dilapidated property. I'm not sure if that's also has a blight lien or not. It may. I would have to. We do have a database that would tell us. I just don't have that information readily handy right now. And then we've got these other 3 pictures that are vacant lots. So we've got an overgrown lot here down on the bottom left, slightly overgrown up here, top right, and then a really well-maintained vacant lot. But it's still vacant. And so we're still looking at those, and we're still going to be assessing sort of the impacts of those. And as mentioned, we did do some data collection on the infrastructure, surface infrastructure, because the perception of neighborhood conditions, they do extend beyond private spaces. It does matter how the sidewalks are kept and the street lights. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. I mentioned connectivity to assets, and I want to just point out here, when we're talking about assets, we're talking about libraries, parks, commercial corridors, schools, and transit. When you live in a neighborhood and you think about how easy it is to maybe walk to a school, walk your kid to school, or maybe just to walk to the store, to the corner store. If you live close to an urban core, that's important, and that might be an asset to some folks that live in the area. And so making that more safe and more attractive to do is definitely of interest when you're looking at surface infrastructure. And this will help us understand and make recommendations and look at best practices in the next phase. This is just a table of the conditions of the different surface infrastructure. I'm not going to spend too much time here other than to mention some of you may notice transit stops, there's a blank, and then none identified. we do acknowledge and we know that there are transit stops in and around these enhancement areas. This is just noteworthy in that the surveyor didn't see them, didn't make note of them because he didn't even see them. So I think that might come up in the next phase as just either part of recommendations or best practices and what that could potentially do to help a neighborhood appearance and improvements. And not spending much time here either. We've got a few slides on infrastructure, even though I said it was a small part. But these are 21 areas, those dots on the map, where the surveyor noted some relevant concerns of the conditions to the sidewalk, street connectivity and the conditions of the street lights or walkability. In the report, because accompanying the presentation and database and maps, part of what the city has asked for is a report after each phase of the study. This is an example of the detail provided in the report for each enhancement area about the surface infrastructure. I'm not going to read this and I'm not going to show you every enhancement area, but I did want to just give you an example of the level of summary and review that was done. So the second part of element 2, as mentioned, is the property assessment. So we needed a way to look at these inventoried properties and assess them and say, okay, so now what? What do we do with these? What does this mean? Where can we, how can we start categorizing them to come up with, we're laying the groundwork for recommendations. And we basically needed some rubric to look at these, a lens to look at these properties through. This slide is, I'll admit, jumping ahead and giving you sort of the end result up front, because I think it helps in the next couple slides when I talk about what we did. Basically, the end result of this lens that I'm talking about are 3 buckets that we consider each of the inventoried properties to be most feasible as a result. So properties that are, you're going to see that are in a hazardous area, and we'll talk about that in a minute, we are suggesting would be most appropriate for a conservation outcome. Properties that are under city site control or close to it would be most appropriate for a disposition redevelopment program outcome. And then properties that are privately owned are going to be most appropriate, in our opinion, for incentives programs. And I will get a little bit more into detail on that. So here's the flow chart or rubric or lens, however you want to refer to it. I'm going to break this down on the next couple slides in half so you can see it better, but I did want you to see that it's all connected. And I wanted to note here that at the top, we have the 2 or really 3 property types that I've been discussing and explaining. And then at the bottom are the 3 buckets, the 3 outcomes that once assessed, a property would fall into. So the next slide, this is just the top half of that flow chart. And what I want to mention here is the property types again, and then these middle boxes, what we call the property characteristics. So depending on where a property type, as it flows through here and the characteristics that apply, is going to determine which of those 3 buckets, those 3 outcome buckets it would fall into and where it would be assessed. Pointing out also that, so a vacant lot in a floodway, this line goes directly down to conservation. A vacant lot not in a floodway is going to go down and be assessed on two different terms, whether it's under city site control or not. And depending on that answer, it may go down into redevelopment, disposition redevelopment, or it may have to come over and go into an incentives program if it doesn't have city site control. And I promise I will talk about those 2 characteristics here in a moment, because I know those may be, some of you may be questioning what that is. Excuse me, jumping ahead, huh? Okay. You all see the bottom of the flow chart now, right? Yeah. Property assessment, okay. So this is what I was just talking about. These are sort of put up here to remind us where these properties came from. The majority of your properties, and we'll see in the next table how many that exactly is, are occupied, right, or privately owned, and so they fall into the incentives bucket. Anything that's city site control, as I mentioned, would fall into this redevelopment bucket, and then floodway properties conservation. This middle box here where it says market conditions, this doesn't impact where the property lands in terms of an outcome, but it does impact these programs that might come out of these different outcomes. So if you have a disposition redevelopment program for historic properties, let's say, that's going to look a little different than a redevelopment disposition program that is just on traditional regular properties that are not historic. And same with incentive programs. If construction costs are really high, like they are right now, that's going to change the design of any incentive program. So that's the market conditions impact what these look like, but they don't impact where the property falls. And let's talk a little bit more about what what these properties are. Conservation or would be hazardous properties, and these are the properties that are in the FEMA floodway, which we identified in phase 1, and I will show you a map of those again. And we just generally would encourage, as those come out of, or they're no longer being used for residential or commercial purposes, and as the city is able to get their hands on them, that those would not be invested for economic purposes or residential purposes, because they're in a FEMA floodway. So examples of what you would do with a conservation property, of course, parks, any other recreation use, stormwater management would be probably a very obvious use for any conservation property. And then redevelopment and disposition, these are properties that are under city site control or close to it. And we've talked a lot about these, darn, my mouse is getting away from me. We've talked a lot about these properties with among the Housing Advisory Committee because these are basically right now the city's adjudicated properties, which are properties that are not technically in city site control, but they are the closest that you have to getting site control of all the properties. And in phase 3, we will give some recommendations about what to do with your adjudicated property and how to get a handle on them and how to move them into the next phase and get them back out to market. So anything that's falling in, and the next table is going to show you the numbers that fall into each of these buckets. So anything falling into there are adjudicated properties. So this is the table of the surveyed properties from the enhancement areas. This shows that 87 floodway properties that are vacant could be considered for conservation. If there's a floodway property, if the surveyor found a floodway property but determined that it's occupied, according to the flow chart that we looked at earlier, let me go back up to it. If it's, if it's a blighted or dilapidated structure that's occupied, even if it's in the floodway, it wouldn't come over to this category and come down and be a conservation property. I just want to make that point because we're not suggesting that people who live in properties right now in the FEMA floodway would be under the conservation model or outcome. And then this shows the 20 properties that I mentioned for disposition and redevelopment programs. Those are adjudicated properties in those 3 enhancement areas. Most of you know that you have more adjudicated properties throughout the city than that. These are just the ones that were surveyed and determined to be unoccupied. So that's why there's a lower number than what's actually out there. And then incentives, we would expect to see this high number because anything that's privately owned, that's not in city site control and not in a floodway is falling into this bucket. And that's the majority of the properties. So that makes sense.
Lois, could you explain the difference between a floodway and a flood zone?
Ooh, put me on the spot. I can tell you the definition of a floodway, but comparing the two, I'm not sure of the nuanced difference. Let me find my definition. The floodway is a FEMA regulated floodway, and it's basically where the waterway, which I think they refer to as waterway or river, where it would potentially go. And I have the definition
There
in
would
here
be
somewhere.
natural laterals that are running throughout the city, like a natural water lateral that runs through the city is a
Right.
floodway versus a home being located in a flood zone. Everything is a flood zone, but a floodway is a designated waterway, be it a lateral or natural waterway.
Thank you. Who was that? Is that Joe? Okay. That's great. Thank you. And for anyone that wants to know, I do have the definition in the report, and I can tell you right now, I have it in my notes here. The channel of a river or other water course and the adjacent land areas that must be reserved in order to discharge the base flood without cumulatively increasing the water surface elevation more than a designated height. FEMA coordination is required for any work, even excavation. So you can see why we put those in that conservation bucket. As they become available and they're vacant, get them out of commerce, get them used for something. Did that answer the question,
Yes.
Councilmember? Okay. And I think I went over all those totals for the different buckets. And this is just a visual of those same numbers that we had on the previous slide in the table. This just shows them on a map and in those enhancement areas. So the orange ones are the redevelopment outcome, which are the adjudicated properties. I know this is hard to see. It's not meant to give you the exact location. It's just meant to give you an idea where they're located. Incentives are all over because those are those privately owned properties. And conservation are those floodway properties, which are shown here. The floodways are shown here as the red areas. And actually, I forgot to mention, and Joe, I think you were the one that brought this up before, examples of those different outcome buckets that we just talked about. So I think I talked about parks and stormwater management and the conservation incentive programs. The one that comes to my mind, and I haven't thought of another one. There's many of them out there, but you have a very close neighboring jurisdiction to Hammond that has an incentive program for stormwater management. And they give grants to homeowners that qualify. They pay the contractors directly to do stormwater management improvements on the property. That may not be what you're necessarily considering down the road for incentives for blighted property, because this addresses a different issue, the stormwater management. But that's what an incentive program is, basically. It's not trying to take the property or do anything with the ownership. It's just trying to incentivize the owner to make improvements. And those can be structured in many different ways. And then a disposition redevelopment program, it's labeled such because those are the properties that eventually, if the city gets clear title to, they would design and create some sort of program to get those properties back into private hands, with restrictions and timelines and requirements for whatever you want to see go on those properties. So you could have design requirements, you could have affordability requirements, stormwater management, green infrastructure requirements on private property. It's wide open for what different designs you could have, and that's where those market conditions come into play, right? You would probably adjust depending on the market conditions at the time. And we're almost to the end, and just key insights roughly, quickly to go over. Roughly 600 vacant properties, 86 dilapidated properties across the 7 enhancement areas. Majority of them are privately owned. I think I mentioned that. The surface infrastructure concerns are basically condition and connectivity. The city has more control over the infrastructure improvements. I don't think I mentioned this, but that's probably pretty obvious to some of you. So that just means it's an easier lift in some ways for the city to address those things. And that's why it's still valuable to look at them, even if we're just doing a quick review. And then opportunities for neighborhood enhancement through residential development is highly dependent on property ownership status. I hope I kind of alluded to that already. And as well as your ability to offer incentives to make changes. And next steps, we are going to come back, like I said, in about 4 to 6 weeks We're going to complete a review of existing policies in Hammond and discuss those. Complete review of programs in other jurisdictions that are similar in size and facing similar challenges. We have a developer feedback. We sent out a questionnaire to developers about Hammond and about developing in Hammond. So we're still summarizing that and sort of compressing that into some feedback for the final report. We do want to outline a strategy for adjudicated property. I know that's important to a lot of you. And then summarizing recommendations. And I hope I didn't go too fast. I feel like I got sidetracked a couple times and slowed down.
All right, Lois, thank you so much. Council administration, this was just an update of element 2. Like she said, the final results will be coming in 4 to 6 weeks. But are there any other questions for her? All right, Lois, we're not hearing any questions, so we'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You too.
Thank you, Joe. Before we move forward, I'd like to call up Michelle Gallo from Crime Stoppers.
Thanks. Kip, thanks for sneaking me in real quick. I'm going to ask Jaden Jones to come up. She is our new community outreach coordinator, and she's going to pass out a few little goodie bags to you guys as I talk. I just wanted to come personally and thank the Hammond City Council members and the Hammond City for the grant that we received in October. I wanted to share some successes we've had this year. I'm happy to announce that anonymous tips are up 80% versus last year. Citizens and students are using the Tap the app, or they're calling the hotline. So we're happy about that. I've approved over $5,000 in rewards. We've paid out about 2,800 of that so far. The month of August, we promoted the P3 app campaign, educating parents about the program, and then went into the schools and presented the P3 app to 4,600 Hammond students in the Hammond schools, with a total of 56 Tangi students so far. Jaden will be out into the schools in January finishing up those P3 app presentations. We, Crime Stoppers, sponsored 15 community outreach projects over this year. I was very proud that we had over 2,000 parents and children to show up at the Night Out Against Crime and Trunk or Treat this October, so that was a great showing. Crime Stoppers continues to sponsor a women's self-defense class. Our next class is December the 10th. This is a free class for 12-year-olds and up. We also, with the increase of suicidal thought tips that we receive from students, we have gotten involved in suicide prevention. And Crime Stoppers co-hosted 2 educational programs this year, and we will be hosting a suicide prevention play at Hammond High in January. So just wanted to give you guys a quick update. Thank you again for the support. We are dedicated to promoting crime prevention, and we will assist our law enforcement in helping them solve crimes. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
And just so we can say the goodie bags are promotional and education items. Just
Yes, they are.
make sure that's
Absolutely.
said out loud.
All right. Next on the agenda, final adoption of ordinance number 1.
Final adoption of an ordinance to approve a rezoning request by RE3 Properties LLC owner to rezone lots 60, 61, and 62 of Block 3 of Vaccaro Park subdivision located at 1409 West Church Street from RM-2 to MX-C, Z-2022-09-00112. Recommended approval by the Zoning Commission.
As explained in the public hearing, this is a rezoning that really just realigns this property with the existing surrounding properties. It is not spot zoning in any way. It does conform to our future land use map for this area as well. And I did have an opportunity to text the owner, who is out of town tonight and could not be with us. He does not have any plans for this property as of now. He just wanted to bring it into alignment with the surrounding properties.
Anyone from the public? All right. Any other questions from anyone on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion approved.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Introduction of ordinance and set for public hearing, old business, number 1.
Introduction of an ordinance to approve an expanded conditional use request by Haven LaFrance owner to allow for a mobile home located at 3605 Della Randall Road per survey by Gilbert Sullivan, RLS dated 3178, Zone RM-2, Z-2022-09-00111, with the following conditions. This is a personal right and expires upon a change in ownership of the property from the person originally granted the conditional use. 2, it meets all the requirements in the Unified Development Code, Article 3, Section 3-4. And 3, the survey submitted is signed and recorded for the official lot of record. Recommended approval by the Zoning Commission, 5-0, Lacey Landrum.
This was heard by the Zoning Commission on October 20th. It was tabled by the request of the owner at the October 25th City Council meeting, and so tonight it's for your consideration for introduction. He is here tonight, and the surrounding properties are zoned multifamily. There are properties to the east of this one that involve duplexes and triplexes. That adjacent property owner was at the public hearing and did express his opposition to this placement of a mobile home. The other properties, though, to the north and to the south of this are vacant wooded properties. And the Zoning Commission did vote 5-0 in favor of recommending approval to this. I will state that one of the considerations that the Zoning Commission is looking at right now is the affordability of homes. And so they're considering that. They're not necessarily changing their regard to that, but it is something we are seeing more applications for mobile home placement. We have 3 coming up for the December meeting. We had 1 on this past meeting, and we have 2 to be introduced tonight. So it is something that we're seeing more of. Doesn't necessarily sway one way or the other with regards to our future land use, because we only have a certain number of areas that are proposed mobile home areas or already approved mobile home areas. This is not in one of those locations.
Wanted to ask you, it looked like it was a gravel road. It was down, do they have city supplies of sewer there or water, or what's the utility service on that road?
I did not look that up, and I do not know offhand. We could look that up and
I was
let you
just
know during the
curious.
public
It looked-
hearing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone on the council? Can I get?
Hi.
I got a question on that, which I was just talking about. So you have to have water and sewer in order for you to put, like a line or something running down through there, in order for you to put something on that property?
I was just asking because it didn't
I know,
look like
no,
it
it's
was
a
developed.
question.
Yeah.
Question. It's just a question. Because I have some property and I'm trying to, that's why I'm in here trying to see what kind of information I can get on this.
I mean, it just depends on how close you are you in the city limits or what property you're talking about?
Yeah.
You should have city water and sewer, I guess, available somewhere. Where you're at? Which
MC
street?
Moore, dead end of MC Moore.
That'd be-
Yeah, you in the city.
Okay, but they telling me different, but that's for another day. I'm just trying to find some information on it.
I'll meet with you after the meeting and see what I would like to talk with you after this meeting, and
Okay.
we can see what you're talking about.
All right, thank
Yeah, but MC Moore is inside the city limits.
Yeah, and I think the parcel that you're speaking about, we've already started some conversation on. Y'all have it at the very north side? Right, and then you have the property that's to the north of that as well, that's outside the city limits? Yes. I've been talking to Bill Bonian a lot about that area. So just so you know, and so others know as well, we can look up all that information with regards to water service, with regards to the lines that are there, the diameter of the lines, with regards to sewer, how close you are to a sewer lift station, whether that could be connected in. All those things can be determined about a property. I just don't know those off the top of my head.
I was just wondering about that. And what was that? Was that annexed into the city, or that always in the city out there? Was that in the parish? I was curious about that little area. Yeah.
I can't tell you that offhand. I was actually myself surprised that
Yeah.
as the road curves, it does turn into, like, it's gravel.
Yeah, it seems like it would have been in the parish, or like it was annexed in the city with some different map that.
It is
Yeah.
literally the very last
Yeah.
section there.
Yeah.
And some of those other sections were, so it would make sense that that was as well. I
Yeah.
can look all that up for you.
Yeah, I was
though.
curious about that. Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
New business, introduction number 1.
Hold on one second. Public hearing. We have a public hearing scheduled for this on December.
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 at 5:30.
New business.
Introduction of an ordinance to approve a request by Lou Casio LLC to re-subdivide parcel 2-A-1 into parcels 2-A-1-A and 2-A-1-B of the Lucasio subdivision located at 1955 Southwest Railroad Avenue, and to accept the dedication of Lucasio Drive and the cul-de-sac in accordance with a preliminary survey by David Patterson, PLS, dated 10/4/22, zoned C-H, sub-2022-10-00198. Recommended approval by the Planning Commission, 5-0. Lacey Landrum.
This was heard by the Planning Commission on this past Thursday, November 10th. They did recommend unanimous approval of this. Mr. David Patterson submitted a preliminary survey. Chuck Spangler, our city engineer, had an opportunity to review that. We had some discussion back and forth about just dedicating Lucasio Drive. Chuck's recommendation, and after further conversation with Mr. Patterson, was to do some sort of cul-de-sac towards the end of it. The original idea was to potentially do a T turnaround, but Chuck really recommended having a little bit more access point. This is at the very end. You'll know it by driving all the way down and turning left to go into the Chick-fil-A drive-through. So this is that area right there. All they're doing is taking their large parcel, subdividing it into two, but the main dedication is that street that goes from Railroad Avenue into the back of that area. Chuck verified that it was built to city standards when it was built. It has had good upkeep since the years of its construction, and so he does recommend accepting that and the cul-de-sac as drawn on the survey.
I just want to ask, when that was put in, how many years ago was that road put in? Probably a few years.
It's been more than 4.
Yeah, I just was wondering, normally when I don't know what the process is, I know the parish is a little bit different, but I was just curious on what was the delay on even taking it in as far as the road, like if it was up to standards whenever they put it in and inspected, what was the delay on them donating it, or.
I don't know that offhand. I can find out that
Yeah,
question for
I
you.
was just curious
and
about
we can
that.
go through that in the public hearing.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was some other, future use or discussion about whether that was going to be a private drive leading into the lots that are back there, or if it had always been intended as eventually becoming public.
Any other questions from anyone else on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon? Public hearing will be scheduled Tuesday, December 13th, 2022 at 5:30.
Introduction number 2.
Introduction of an ordinance to approve a request by Eric Long, owner, to allow for a mobile home located at 1400 Apple Street per survey by Richard Krebs, PLS dated 6/3/19, zoned RS-3, Z-2022-10-00114, with the following conditions. This is a personal right and expires upon a change in ownership of the property from the person originally granted conditional use. It meets all the requirements in the Unified Development Code, Article 3, Section 3.4, and the survey submitted is signed and recorded for the official lot of record. Recommended approval by the Zoning Commission. Lacey Landrum.
This, like the prior case, was heard just this past Thursday on November 10th. It was unanimously recommended by all 5 commissioners for approval. In the additional information on the staff report, you'll see that there are a few other placements of mobile homes that meet kind of closer to what this one is doing. That's a little bit different than the last one we just reviewed. This one is actually adjacent to and touches a proposed mobile home area. That area is just to the east of this site. And there are 3 others that were approved in similar circumstances over the last few years for placement of a mobile home that were not in the exact proposed mobile home area, but were adjacent to that. I've included those just for reference. We also did learn during the discussion at the Zoning Commission that Mr. Eric Long intends for his daughter, Ariel McGowan, to live in this mobile home, and he does not intend to live there, so that's why her name is included as part of this.
Any other questions from anyone else on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Public hearing will be scheduled for December 13th, 2022 at 5:30.
Introduction number 3.
Introduction of an ordinance to approve a request by Christopher Ruffin, owner, to rezone Lot A, Block 1 of Pine Ridge Addition, located at 712 Magazine Street, from RS-3 to MX-N in accordance with a survey by William Bowden, PLS dated 1/31/22, Z-2022-05-0010, with the following conditions: no alcohol sales, no marijuana sales, and recommended approval by the Zoning Commission, 5-0. Lacey Landrum.
This case and the next case are very similar and next-door properties. This one deals with 712 Magazine Street. Your next case is going to deal with 706 Magazine Street. The Zoning Commission looked at these very carefully. When they had first looked at this property specifically, they had a different outcome, and I think it's because they really hadn't come to a good agreement among the neighbors. And Councilman Andrews was good to help facilitate that. Along with Pastor Brown, there were several people here to speak in favor of this property being rezoned. I think some of the concerns were from one of the adjacent property owners who did express her email in part of the packet. That email was sent prior to a meeting that she had with Councilman Andrews, with Mr. Ruffin, and with some other people involved, and they all came to this kind of compromise idea of making sure that there would be no alcohol sales here. Mr. Ruffin, again, like we described in the first case that we heard, rezoning doesn't necessarily mean you go to this one specific use. Rezoning does open the door to several uses. However, Mr. Ruffin's intent for this property is to establish a restaurant that would mostly be to-go food. And he does not wish to sell alcohol there, and that was a good compromise that was reached by everyone in coming to this conclusion. So the Zoning Commission did unanimously recommend, after hearing lots of support from the adjacent property owners and other property owners in this area. This does also align with a similar case that was zoned to MXC that's a few blocks south of this location. And it also, there's several other properties that are kind of MXC in and around the Magazine Street area.
Any questions from anyone else on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Divatario.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Aye.
Public hearing is scheduled for Tuesday, December 13th at 5:30.
Introduction number 4.
Introduction of an ordinance to approve a request by Christopher Ruffin, owner, to rezone Lot B, Block 1 of Pine Ridge Edition, located at 706 Magazine Street, from RS-3 to MX-N, in accordance with the survey by William Bodine, PLS, dated 1/31/22, Z-22-10-00113, with the following conditions: no alcohol sale, no marijuana sales. Recommended approval by Zoning Commission, 5-0, Lacey Landrum.
As with the property just described at 712 Magazine, they recommended approval of the same rezoning to the MXN. There are several other properties in this area that are zoned MXC or MXN, and so this does kind of align with some of our plans. Also, Magazine Street, I forgot to mention this in the earlier, is a collector in the major street plan. So it's similar to kind of Church, not exactly the same traffic, of course, but it is kind of a similar landscape there.
I have a question. So if this were approved, it's rezoned, but is there some type of restriction within, from 20 years from now, it says no alcohol sales, even if it's sold?
That's correct.
And we're not going to, someone's going to sell this property thinking that they're going to get to open a restaurant with liquor, and then they're going to say, well, it's a hardship that I didn't know about when I purchased it. That's not our problem.
That's
right?
correct.
Okay.
So there's two things, and we did talk about this at the Zoning Commission meeting, because this is a little bit different. What you normally do, like you've seen with the mobile homes, and Andre and I spoke about this too, typically what we do is we do an expanded conditional use. We expand what can be happening at that property. This one is kind of the reverse of that. You're giving the bigger zoning to it, but you're restricting the uses that can be done. Mm-hmm. And the commission and the council both have those tools to regulate land use and how that happens going forward in our community. In this regard, they felt like rezoning with the bigger options was a better idea, and just to label these restrictions on it. We talked about how our records management system that we have in the building permit office actually attaches to parcels and addresses now. So this pulls up with the attachments to it. So if someone were to come in with either a zoning request or with a building permit and say, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, it's flagged at that point
Perfect.
of that person knowing. This would also be an ordinance that would be recorded. So hopefully, if it was a good title search, hopefully it would be coming up with those restrictions as well.
Good. Okay. Thank you.
Any other question from any council member? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Councilman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Divatario. Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Aye.
Public hearing will be scheduled for Tuesday, December 13th at 5:30.
Resolutions. Resolution number 1.
A resolution to approve Star Mike Star LLC, located at 3151 Highway 190 West, Hammond, Louisiana, 70401, to obtain a permit to sell high-low alcohol. The owner is Star LLC, Casey Cagle.
Good afternoon. We're coming for y'all. This is actually a new ownership situation. It's the Food and Fun right there in front of Cracker Barrel. The new owners are here to get their alcohol approval for this convenience store.
Anyone from the public here on this matter?
Oh, so it's a gas station? I got you.
Any other questions from anyone from the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Casey.
Casey. All right. Resolution number 2.
A resolution to accept the proposed health insurance package for calendar year 2023. Mr. Henry Powell.
Good afternoon, council. Henry Powell, 110 West Morris, Hammond. Tonight, I'm going to go over the renewal of the employee benefits that's provided to all the city employees. After shopping the medical insurance, Blue Cross Blue Shield came back with a 2.8% increase. Originally, it was 5.8. After looking at some new claims data that had came in, they reduced that down to 2.8%. If you recall, last year we had a 0, so we're trending very well when it comes to our claims experience. We did shop the insurance with Humana, Cigna, Aetna, and United Healthcare, and none of those were competitive with the renewal. Is there any questions on that?
How's that trending for other?
This is very good compared
entities.
to other entities. Seeing a lot of 8, 9, 10 percenters, but this is very good.
Good.
Henry, isn't that what you said, the inflation, the medical inflation was? It was somewhere around 8 or 9%?
Around 8.5%. And you combine that with the RX inflation, I mean, it gets into the double digits, but mostly 8.5% is being used as a benchmark for inflation. So you're well under that. And of course, last year you were at flat, so you were very far under that. Secondly, all of the other products that are offered to the city are all 0 increases. So there is no increase to any other products that are offered to the city or that the city provides to its employees, the dental and the vision and the life and disability. Thirdly, we discussed a new way to fund the Benny card, which has been very popular, and your employees have treated this product very, very well. And we have decided that now, instead of having a donut hole in the Benny card, we're going to go ahead and load all the funds up front that the city provides, and then the employee would be responsible on the back end. There has been some confusion with some employees by having the donut hole in the middle. They're getting a little bit confused as to when their deductible or their portion is actually time to be met because of the way the EOBs are processed and come in, so they get a little confused. So I don't feel like this would cause any major upset to the apple cart as far as where your funding goes. You've been pretty level on the funding for at least 5 years. Your funding almost always comes in as expected. So I don't see where this would change anybody's mind and just go run to the doctor because, oh, I got more money, you know. So that's one thing that we're proposing. We did predict last year you would use roughly 40% of your funds. You've used 30% to this point, so it should work out exactly the same again this year. The funding would remain exactly the same as it was prior. and we do estimate again at a 40% utilization of those funds.
Certainly seems to be less confusing
Yes.
for trying to reload the card and all of that, so I think it makes sense.
That is the number one complaint we have, although everybody's pleased with having the funds. The number one complaint is the confusion on when is my turn and when is your turn. So I think this will eliminate that confusion.
It would be interesting to see, though, if we move to this, if we're having more exposure on the percentage of funds used.
Typically, the percentage of people who use a deductible is going to occur no matter what, whether it's occurs at the beginning of the year or at the end of the year. You know, people accumulate it all, and at the end of the year is when it all comes to head. So at that point, it will become their funds versus your funds. I think it's just a mechanism to eliminate the confusion. So with that being said, we're asking for the approval of the medical insurance renewal, the ancillary products renewal, as well as the Benny card funding as it was proposed.
Anyone from the public have any questions on this? Any other questions from anyone on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
And they are, we have scheduled open enrollment for November 28th, 29th, and 30th. Those details will be forthcoming, along with the benefits book that they put together that outlines everything in detail.
It'll come in your emails as well as hard copies. Thank you all.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Henry.
Resolution number 3.
A resolution to adopt the Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire for fiscal year 2021 to 2022, and to authorize the mayor to sign the questionnaire. Laura Hammond?
Good evening, council.
Good evening.
So this is the annual Louisiana Compliance Questionnaire that we do each year in connection with the audit. It is a document that originates from the Louisiana Legislative Auditor's Office. The questions center around state law and how we follow those, such as meeting minutes, public bid law, budget adoption. So once you guys this certifies everything on there specific to the municipalities, they'll be certified and submitted to the auditors after tonight's approval. Are there any questions?
Any questions from anyone on the public? Any questions or concerns from anyone from the council? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to approve. Second.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez? Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Thank you, Laura. Resolution number 4.
A resolution authorizing the purchase of equipment for the new 2022 police Tahoes from Dana Safety Supply, Inc. for a total of $64,000. Chief, Assistant Chief Monasterer?
Monastery. Either one of them will work. So good evening, council. This is for the tie-hose that y'all approved a long time back, and we have yet to receive them, but this is the equipment. We're trying to get the equipment in, so when the cars do come in, we're ready to go. This item here is just for equipment, item 4, and we are piggybacking off of East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Office to get the equipment in. They've met all the requirements of the bid laws, state contracts, and all of that. So all of that's been taken care of, and this item 4 is just for equipment.
Okay. Anyone from the public have any questions on it? Any questions from anyone on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to approve.
Councilman Andrews?
Aye.
Councilman Divatario?
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez?
Aye.
Councilman Leon?
Aye.
Resolution number 5.
A resolution authorizing the purchase of equipment and installation for the new 2022 police Tahoes from Dana Safety Supplies, Inc. for a total of $108,720.60. Assistant Chief Munster.
So item 5 is actually some more equipment and the installation of the equipment. That's what that item is for.
Any questions from anyone?
The combined 4 and 5 will give us all of the equipment and the installation for the Tahoes when they come in, the 13 Tahoes that we have on order.
Any questions from anyone in the public? Any questions or concerns from anyone in the council? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Divatario.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Aye.
Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Resolution number 6.
A resolution to authorize the mayor to sign an addendum to the rail spur lease with Home Depot, extending the term period to 2024. Lacey Landrum.
We realized when we took a quick look at the rail spur leases, we have one with Home Depot and one with Graham Packaging. We thought they both terminated on the same date since they were both established on the same date. However, one was written to terminate in 2024, the other was written to terminate around now. So we are extending or asking for you to extend the Home Depot lease to the same term period to meet Graham Packaging. This does not change the agreement of the amount. They still pay $350 per rail car per month for traveling on the rail spur. They're pushed by CN Railroad, and so we reflect off of those numbers to kind of verify, are they averaging the same amount of rail cars? Overall, Home Depot pays about $4,930 a month for this service. And so this keeps all those terms of the amount of money the same. This just extends that agreement so that it sunsets at the same time of the lease that we made with Graham Packaging.
Any questions from anyone in the public? Any questions or concerns from anyone on the council? Pleasure of the council.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Councilman Andrews.
Aye.
Councilman Divatario.
Aye.
Councilwoman Gonzalez.
Aye.
Councilman Leon.
Reports, Mayor?
Congratulations to everyone on the council that's back, and reminder to everyone December 10th, we should have a vote.
All right. Any council reports?
I just want to thank District 4 for re-electing me, and enjoyed serving the last 4 years, and look forward to serving another 4 for District 4. So I'm very thankful for District 4. Also, the speed bumps, the lady Lacey I sent in the information to, she hadn't been contacted yet. So she needs to be contacted to kind of figure out what location they want to put them on over there on Barnes. I sent you her name and number. Melissa. Yeah. Thank you.
Any other council reports?
I'd just like to remind everybody that there's a number of activities that's being put on throughout the city during the holidays, and take part in your city.
All right. Again, I'd like to congratulate everyone that'll be returning back to the council. It's been a pleasure working with you guys. It's going to be a pleasure to work again for the next 4 years, to work together to move forward in the city of Hammond. That being said, everyone enjoy your Thanksgiving with your families. Enjoy it. Take time to reflect over the last year and give thanks for the many things that you have received. And always remember, there's somebody that's in a way worse position than what we are in, so we should be thankful. I'm talking about in other countries. So we should be really thankful for the opportunities and the things that we have. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Meeting adjourned.